This is Jim Fetzer, your host on Authentic News right here on RBN Live this 22nd day of April, 2025. You're not going to believe this. A former Israeli official is running the Israeli-Iran White House policy. Absolutely stunning. Just simply stunning. Stand by. You're going to hear it. Here we go.
Vacuum. Let's put this element up on the screen. The first of what hopefully will become many co-bro lines with my colleague, Sagar Enjeti. This drop site news article headline, Trump's NSC director for Israel and Iran previously worked for Israeli Ministry of Defense. That headline is what it says it is.
Well,
you're like, wait a minute, you can do that? You can work for the Israeli Ministry of Defense and then you can work for the United States? Well, of course you can. Why did you think that you couldn't?
Well, it's very interesting, isn't it, Ryan? Let's break some of this down for the audience. So this is very important. So as I explained previously about the NSC, we just talked about power vacuum. So not only do we have Mike Waltz, who we know advocated for a war with Iran when the Israelis were here, we now know that he put in charge of the Israel and the Iran portfolio, combined that portfolio under this woman, Merav Sarin. Now, Merav Sarin is the director for Israel and Iran at the NSC. Now, what we know from her own background, publicly reported, let's put that up there on the screen, please, shall we, is that she admits, quote, worked at Israel's Ministry of Defense, where she participated in negotiations in the West Bank between Israel's coordinator for government activities in the territories and Palestinian Authority officials. So this is a person, Ryan, who literally worked for the Israeli Ministry of Defense. Basically, we were just talking about the Pentagon, the Israeli version of the Pentagon, who is now working in the United States government to develop policy vis-a-vis that person. I should also mention there that biography comes from the Foundation for Defense of Democracies, which is the probably single most pro-war with Iran organization in the United States today.
And so that was previously known. What wasn't known is that she's working at the NSC. There was never a public announcement made about that, but the NSC has confirmed it to us.
Yes,
we can read this NSC spokesperson, Brian Hughes, says the following. Merav is a patriotic American who has served in the United States government for years, including for President Trump, Senator Ted Cruz, and Congressman James Comer. We are thrilled to have her expertise in the NSC, where she carries out the president's agenda on a range of Middle East issues. Because I had asked, do you have anything set up in place to mitigate potential conflicts of interest? Because, she is overseeing policy with a country where she previously served. That country, and this is why this matters so much, that country, Israel, is currently trying to blow up our negotiations with Iran and between Iran and the United States. We are involved, and we're going to talk about those more in a moment. We're involved in these direct talks with Iran because the president of the United States has repeatedly said he believes that negotiations are a better solution to our problem with Iran than an attack. Israel disagrees. Israel wants us to attack.
Yes.
Israel has argued internally that it wants us to attack. So the NSC director for both of those countries previously worked for Israel.
How do you get a...
I mean, look at that. How disgusting is that? And it's clear there's this Walls guy who's this national security advisor who put her in place, who's totally biased. He appears to me to be Mossad. I mean, this is disgusting. I mean, give me a break. If you got any doubt about whether this guy is for America first, I think your doubts have to be growing. On the other hand, Trump says he's not in a rush to attack Iran because Tehran wants to talk. On Thursday, Trump said he was not in a rush to attack Iran when asked about a report from the New York Times saying he waved off an Israeli plan to bomb Iranian nuclear facilities that would require significant U.S. support. I wouldn't say waved off. I'm not in a rush to do it, because I think that Iran has a chance to have a great country and to live happily without death, and I'd like to see that. That's my first option. If there's a second, I think it'd be very bad for Iran. I think Iran is wanting to talk. I hope they're wanting to talk. It's going to be very good for them if they do. I'd like to see Iran thrive in the future. implying if they don't talk, they're not going to thrive in the future because the U.S. is going to bomb the hell out of them. That's what he's implying. Meanwhile, here we have Professor Jeffrey Sachs. What if Trump says no to war, but Netanyahu says yes? Think about it. What do we do in that conflict situation? Here we go. We got Judge Napolitano.
Pope Francis was a great moral leader who reached across all religions. He was heard and revered around the world. He had very strong personal bonds with religious leaders of other faiths. I got to see him interact with the Muslim leaders, with the leaders of other Christian faiths and denominations, dialogue across civilizations. Right. It was made explicit by President Trump and others that Netanyahu is trying to pull the U.S. into an attack on Iran, the kind of attack that could start World War III. We should always remember Iran has a strategic alliance with Russia, for example, and Iran itself is, despite the rhetoric, a powerful country with a powerful ability to respond to an attack. And so Israel is, under Netanyahu, is an extremist rogue nation, but it has so much power in Washington because of how corrupt Washington is that the answer to your question is he may yet succeed in pulling the U.S. into war. I think Trump is trying to resist it. This is the good news. There have actually been now meetings, negotiations between the U.S. and Iran that, by the announcement of both sides, are making some progress. Netanyahu's having a fit over this. No doubt the Israel lobby is working overtime to try to destroy these negotiations. So this is a perilous time because Israel's on a rampage. It is, of course, committing mass murder in Gaza. It is trying to engage in ethnic cleansing in both Gaza and the West Bank. It is expropriating violently lands also in the West Bank. It has invaded Lebanon. It has invaded Syria. And it's aiming for war with Iran. So given that recklessness and given Netanyahu's out of control recklessness within Israel, firing the head of intelligence, absolutely dividing his own country, but controlling our politicians, this is an extraordinarily dangerous moment.
He's absolutely right. Extraordinarily dangerous. Here it follows a conservative firing line. If negotiation with Iran fail, the course of human history could quickly turn in an apocalyptic direction. Let's get a couple of parts of this. President Trump says we have a problem with Iran. He insists he's going to be the one to solve the problem. If the Iranians are willing to compromise, there's a chance we could see a negotiated deal. If the Iranians are not willing to compromise, there will be military action against Iran. The Iranians are prepared to hit back with everything they got if their nuclear facilities are attacked. And once that happens, there'll be no turning back. So there's a lot riding on the negotiation with Iran that began last weekend and will continue this upcoming. If the negotiation go badly, of course, of human history could take an apocalyptic turn very rapidly. Meanwhile, Rand says Israel is trying to undermine their talks with the U.S. Of course they are. Iran's foreign ministry said Monday All right, Israel was seeking to undermine Tehran's nuclear talks with Washington. Comments that came after reports that Israel was considering a limited attack on Iran. Iranian Foreign Ministry spokesman Esmail Baghdadi said a kind of coalition is forming to undermine and disrupt the diplomatic process, and that the Zionist regime is at the center of this effort. Of course, absolutely, have no doubt about it. This is promote the Greater Israel Project, after all. This is the last of the 7 countries in the next 5 years. Wesley Clark explained where the U.S. was going to assist in taking out in the wake of 9/11, which was an Israeli op. It was done precisely for this reason, to get the U.S. to assist Israel in taking out the modern Arab states. That serves as a counterbalance to Israel's domination of the entire region and eventually the Persian nation of Iran, which I've reiterated innumerable times, may be the most peace-loving nation in the world today, having not launched a war of aggression against any other state since 1777. Bear that in mind. Not only that, but of course they have no nuclear weapons. They're not pursuing nuclear weapons. Even Tulsi, our director of national intelligence, confirmed the IC community, including CIA, agreed Iran doesn't have nukes and isn't pursuing nukes. So what the hell are we doing talking about attacking Iran for a non-existent nuclear weapons program? Well, that's a big lie Bibi's been telling for 20 years minimally. Get this now, which ought to be very sobering. Russia will not leave a strike on Iran unanswered. Russia will not leave a possible U.S. strike on Iran unanswered. This point of view is expressed by former Pentagon advisor Douglas McGregor. According to him, Tehran is too important for Moscow. Iran is strategically important for Russia. That's why Russia will not stand aside and do nothing if we launch a massive attack on Iran. He added, to understand the role that the Islamic Republic plays for the Russian Federation, it's enough to look at the history of the region, especially during World War II. Let us recall that the U.S. is currently on the brink of a direct military confrontation with Iran. Some time ago, the head of the White House, Donald Trump, issued an ultimatum to Tehran, demanding that it conclude a nuclear deal by May 1st. Otherwise, the American leader threatened the Islamic Republic with horrific bombings. Let us add that today the Russian president signed a law on ratification of a treaty on comprehensive strategic partnership between Russia and Iran. According to the letter of this document, if one of the parties is attacked, the other should not provide any assistance to the aggressor. In addition, as follows from the treaty, Russia and Iran confirmed their commitment to the development of military technical cooperation, considered an important component of maintaining global security. Moscow and Tehran will also refrain from joining third countries in sanctions against each other and guarantee the non-application of unilateral coercive measures. I think it will go further than that. Meanwhile, U.S. informs allies in Paris, war is lost, will fulfill Russia's demands. Check this out.
Hey everyone, big heads up, Paleo Valley's running a sale.
Meanwhile, momentary. Here we go.
With me again today. Earlier today, the 18th of April 2025, I made a video, I posted it, I uploaded it, with the information that I had at that time regarding Marco Rubio's, the current Secretary of State of the United States of America, statement regarding if we don't make a deal now, in the next few days, the United States of America will abandon the negotiations, the talks, the peace talks. This is the video I posted earlier today. U.S. will abandon Ukraine peace talks within days. Negotiations, another West attempt to fool Russia, question mark. But they say U.S. will abandon Ukraine peace talks within days. Within days. All right. So what's going on here? What happened? There was a meeting in Paris between the Americans, the French, the Brits, the Ukrainians, and probably nobody else. And the Americans came over there with a list. And they came with some proposals and gave it to these baboons and said, this is what we're going to do. This is the peace plan. Cut the crap. The guys were listening. And right now I have the information. I have the details on what the Americans told those baboons in Paris. And that's not good for the baboons. Why? Because the United States of America basically told them, we're going to give the Russians this. We're going to do this for the Russians. We're going to agree with the Russians on this. And you backed off. Here is the article. Russia Today. This is from the 18th of April, 2025. United States of America proposes leaving former Ukrainian territories under Russian control. Proposes. Remember, United States of America changed other countries' boundaries, borders before. I will just use, for instance, Yugoslavia with Kosovo or Serbia. Washington's offer also reportedly envisions easing sanctions on Moscow and ending Kiev's NATO aspirations. The U.S. has presented its allies with the details of its peace plan to bring the conflict between Russia and Ukraine to an end, Bloomberg reported on Friday, today, citing European officials familiar with the matter. The contours of the plan were outlined during a meeting in Paris on Thursday, yesterday. The proposal reportedly includes easing sanctions on Russia, as well as terminating Ukraine's aspiration to join NATO. That was one of the root causes. The roadmap would effectively freeze the war, with the formerly Ukrainian territories held by Russia remaining under Moscow's control, the sources suggested. One of the officials told Bloomberg that the proposal still had to be discussed with Kiev, or imposed on Kiev, adding that the plan would not actually amount to a definitive settlement of the conflict. Moreover, Kiev's European backers would not recognize the territories of Russia as Russians, the source suggests.
That's pretty peculiar, of course. This is, however, consistent with Russia's desire to keep the territories they have. They are not going to relinquish them. In addition, that NATO should be off the table. Ukraine will never be a part of NATO. In addition, of course, what they want is that demilitarization of Ukraine and denazification of the government. That is what the Russians want, and I declare that's what the Russians are going to get. Meanwhile, here we have a former CIA analyst. Russians that take Kiev, Sumy, and Odessa before the conflict ends. I won't be surprised. This is actually from Pravda. Russian forces will take Kiev, Sumy, and Odessa before the conflict in Ukraine ends. Former CIA analyst Larry Johnson said in an interview with YouTube channel Deep Dive. I believe that in the end, they will take everything. Dnipro, Sumy, hey, even Kiev and Odessa before the
I never needed anybody's help in any way. Now these days are gone, I'm not so self-assured. Now I find I change my mind and open up the doors. Help me if you can.
Well, here's some more news about Ukraine. U.S.-Ukraine signed memorandum of intent to move forward with a minerals deal. This is antiwar.com. A Ukrainian official announced Thursday the U.S. and Ukraine had signed a memorandum of intent to move forward with an economic deal that will give the U.S. a piece of Ukraine's rare earth minerals and other natural resources. My understanding is most of that is in Russian-held territory, so I expect it will not come to pass. Meanwhile, Poland vows revenge. Russia wiped out Polish soldiers of an elite unit of Grom and one HIMARS system. Well, that's what happened when you go to war with Russia. You're going to get your ass whipped. Meanwhile, Trump rejects a $50 billion weapons deal for Ukraine. Rejects. Hal Turner reports. President Donald Trump does not want to deliver weapons to Ukraine. According to Germany's Bild magazine, he rejected a deal with Ukraine worth $50 billion. Trump is more interested in negotiation with Putin than making money from arms deliveries, the German newspaper adds. Yes, let us hope that continues to be the case. Meanwhile, Rubio. If the U.S. is to decide, will decide within days if the Ukraine peace deal is possible, Secretary of State Marco Rubio said President Trump will decide if ending the war in Ukraine is possible sometime in the coming days. We're going to continue with this endeavor for weeks. We're not going to continue this endeavor for weeks or months on end. So we need to determine very quickly now, I'm talking about a matter of days, whether or not this is doable in the next few weeks. And of course, walking away presumably would mean ending funding and weapons to Ukraine, which is meaning it's actually going to bring about the end of the war. Here we have more from Hal Turner. Ukraine extends martial law. No election, no demobilization, no end in sight. Ukraine's parliament just pushed elections further down the road and locked in troop mobilization until August 6th. 357 members of parliament voted yes. One dared to say no. That lone voice, member of parliament Oleksiy Honchikerno, called it what it is, slavery without a deadline. He bashed the system for trapping soldiers indefinitely and using what he called ineffective and humiliated mobilization tactics, fighting the war and the law. Good. Meanwhile, paratroopers from the 95th Separate Assault Brigade of the Armed Forces of Ukraine are ready to lead the march on Kiev to overthrow Zelensky. Get this. Ukrainian underground. A new maiden is brewing in Ukraine, and the military do not like the policy pursued by Zelensky, are ready to lead it. According to the Ukrainian underground, talk of a march on Kiev is already open. The servicemen of the 95th Separate Airborne Assault Brigade of the Armed Forces of Ukraine, which participated in the Kursk adventure, completely invented by the illegitimate, called for the overthrow of Zelensky. According to the underground, it's a brigade ready to lead the march on Kiev and act against Zelensky. Not against the Nazi regime itself, but only against the clown who leads it. The main complaint is a policy he's pursuing, which leads to the disintegration of Ukraine and its division between Russia and other states. That's, of course, a welcome sign. Meanwhile, an ITV documentary, Our Land, lays bare the fanaticism of Israeli settler movement. An Israeli settler polishes his gun. The Palestinian savages around here, they have no mercy, no law, nothing, he says, coolly, just blood and blood, like you see in the movies. The settler, introduced to television viewers as Yair, has a beard and a ponytail, speaks fluent English, is one of the most prominent figures featured in ITV's brilliant new documentary, Our Land, made by BAFTA-winning filmmaker Jordan Bryan and produced by Hard Cash Productions. It was filmed across 8 months last year in the occupied West Bank, a rarity on British television. It provides up-close insight into the sensibility and motivations of the Israeli settler movement where they seem to be suffering from some kind of psychosis, collective psychosis. Very bizarre. Meanwhile, single deadliest Yemen strike of Trump presidency destroys vital oil part. Fresh U.S. airstrikes on Yemen Thursday marked the single deadliest known attack under President Trump's new campaign targeting the Houthis. The Pentagon had been intensely bombing since March 15.
The truth.
You're listening to Republic Broadcasting Network. Real news, real talk, real people. Because you can handle the truth.
At the window, wearing the face that she keeps in a jar by the door. Who is it for? All the lonely people. Where do they all come from? All the lonely people.
Sad to say, Dominican Republic nightclub collapse. Relatives press charges against owner. 231 dead. Not good. Family of Dominican Republic nightclub collapse victim press charges. The parents and wife of one of those who died when the roof of a nightclub collapsed in the Dominican Republic last week have become the first to press charges against the club's owners. Police Lieutenant Virgilio Rafael Cruz Abante, one of 231 killed when the roof of the Jet Set music venue collapsed during a merengue music concert. The lawyer for the Cruz Abante family said they had brought manslaughter charges against the owner and managers of the Jet Set Club. Other families have said they also plan to file lawsuits. Meanwhile, Zionism, the human parasitoid, Scott Ritter Extra. The tiny jewel wasp injects a neurotoxin venom into the ganglia of cockroaches, transforming the larger insect into a zombie, which willingly allows itself to be transformed into a living host for the next generation of jewel wasps to feed on before emerging into the world, ready to prey on other unsuspecting cockroaches. Israel is a modern-day equivalent of the jewel wasp, a predator which infects its host with mind-altering poison, so it willingly sustains a parasitic intrusion into its being that will eventually take its life. The host in this case is the United States. By allowing Israel to turn our nation into a zombified version of what our founding fathers envisioned, we simply facilitate our own collective demise. Well stated. Meanwhile, many Iraqis unhappy with Islamist Syrian president's invite to the Arab League summit in Baghdad. Next month, Iraq will host the Arab League's 34th summit in Baghdad, seen as an exciting opportunity for Iraq after the protracted U.S. invasion and occupation to finally reclaim some regional influence for themselves. It's become a source of no small amount of controversy inside Iraq, however, with the announcement Wednesday by Prime Minister Mohammed Shia al-Sudani that the president of neighboring Syria, Ahmed al-Shara, has been invited. It's a sore spot for many Iraqis after decades of war because Shara was formerly a high-ranking member of al-Qaeda in Iraq, alternatively participating in a violent insurgency against the Iraqis. And in case you forgot, al-Qaeda was the entity blamed for 9/11 as patsies to distract from the role of Israel. Meanwhile, Trump says China has been calling a lot since last week's tariff deal that something could happen as soon as 3 weeks? I'm not so sure.
If you're shopping for a home, Realtor.com's Real Commute tool lets you find homes.
President Donald Trump said Thursday that China has been reaching out a lot ever since he nearly tripled U.S. tariffs on Chinese imports, suggesting to reporters that two nations could reach a deal in as soon as 3 to 4 weeks. During a gaggle with reporters after signing executive orders related to deregulating the seafood industry, Trump was asked about his ongoing negotiation with Chinese officials, and in particular, whether he has yet spoken to Chinese President Xi Jinping about the ongoing trade battle. They have reached out a number of times, he said, referring to high-level Chinese officials. When asked how frequently they've been in touch since last week, Trump tripled his Chinese tariff increase from 54% to 145%. The president responded, a lot. Meanwhile, Henry Macau, no one wants the ugly truth. The alt media's false opposition. I asked Mike Adams, Greg Hunter, and Candace Owen to interview me. Never mind Tucker Carlson, Stu Peters, or Joe Rogan. No one wants the ugly truth. Trump, Putin, and Netanyahu belong to Shabbat, a Jewish supremacist cult that plans to genocide non-Jews under the guise of another world war. Freemasons have orchestrated every world war to undermine Western civilization and kill patriots. The leaders of Iran, Hamas, Hezbollah, Israel, the U.S., and EU, and China are Freemasons planning this world war. Patrick O'Carroll summarized a recent interview I did with Kevin Barrett. Starting about 12 minutes, Kevin Barrett interviews the great Henry Macau, who's a notable anti-Zionist Jew and an ardent critic of the Gnostic dualist Luciferian doomsday sect Chabad, whose members coincidentally include Donald Trump, Vladimir Putin, Benjamin Netanyahu, Volodymyr Zelensky, and more. Henry opens with the following statement. My take is that Judaism has been taken over by a cult called the Shabbat, who are Kabbalists and Satanists. Unfortunately, most of the central banksters belong to them. Even worse, the Kabbalists believe that the world was created for Jews and that the Goyim livestock must worship Jews as God or else be exterminated. I know that this is ridiculous. That's not the view of the vast majority of Jews who are ignorant about this, but nonetheless, it is what has happened. Judaism, and hence banking, and hence the whole world, has been subverted by the satanic cult called the Shabbat. That is my extreme finding that no one wants to acknowledge, and I do not blame them, since it's pretty frightening, and I hope I am wrong. I wish I could say I had reason to think he is, but I do not. Meanwhile, Colonel McGregor says a quiet part out loud. Real Donald Trump POTUS is owned by the Israeli lobby. So is cabinet picks. The White House is occupied territory. Here we have a report about it.
Unleashed Prime Minister Netanyahu to resume genocide in Gaza, which unfortunately resulted, unfortunately, it was intentional, the killing of 400 civilians in the past 2 days.
I don't think he has any choice. I think when he ran for office, he made certain agreements with major donors. These donors move far beyond just Miriam Adelson. And these donors oblige him to effectively underwrite whatever Mr. Netanyahu wants to do. I thought it was interesting that a recent meeting was set up for the United States with Azerbaijan to talk about cooperation with Israel, but it was set up by Mr. Netanyahu. He called and made the arrangements with Mr. Aliyev, who's the president of Azerbaijan. The State Department did not do it. I think we're very much in the grip of the Israel lobby, and I think President Trump is obliged to go along, and I don't see any evidence that he's going to diverge from that path.
Does he have no choice but to back up Israel militarily when it attacks Iran?
I think so. And keep in mind, you always have the possibility that a war is precipitated somehow by Israel somewhere in the region with Iran. The Iranians respond. And the expectation is, with the buildup of force in the region, we're sending additional carrier battle groups over there right now. The expectation is that we will reinforce whatever the Israelis want to do. We've already done all of the planning for joint strikes and joint strike packages. We're sharing all of the intelligence with our vast satellite arrays with theirs. So I think it's a foregone conclusion. I can't predict when or how, but I think it's going to happen.
Can you get your...
Yeah, you think it's going to happen. What a catastrophe it will be should it come to pass. Trump calls Harvard a joke as the IRS reportedly plans to rescind the university's tax-exempt status. This is unbelievable. The IRS plans to rescind the tax-exempt status of Harvard, CNN reported, citing two sources familiar with the matter, with President Trump calling the elite university a joke. A final decision is expected soon, CNN added. The U.S. Homeland Security also announced the cancellation of two DHS grants, totaling over $2.7 million to Harvard, as the administration moves to tighten its chokehold on the university. This is a complete and utter disgrace, and it's all because there are students protesting genocide, and which there could be no more worthy form for protest. Genocide. Unbelievable. Meanwhile, we have tariffs hit 245% on China. Listen to this. He's showing American workers for China. And they're grossly overweight. I know that's a visual event. Meanwhile, exclusive. USA depopulation agenda exposed. Shocking truths revealed. Daily Pulse reports. The population control network is so vast, so deeply embedded in our institutions that mapping it out literally resembles a galaxy. One man had put in the work to connect the dots with the help of AI. His name, Andrew Arnold. According to Arnold, one of the earliest launch points of the population control agenda began in the 1930s with birth control experiments conducted in Puerto Rico. The trials were quietly carried out on marginalized communities without their knowledge or consent and were planned and funded by elite foundations and government-connected institutions. But that was just the beginning. As Arnold continued digging, the connections only got darker. The same elite pushing global birth control programs were also deeply embedded in the military-industrial complex. Members of Skull and Bones, the Rockefeller Foundation, Council on Foreign Relations weren't just involved, they were leading the charge. He also found the UN Population Division was seated by U.S. intelligence-linked think tanks in the 1950s. What looked like neutral data-driven planning was actually a soft power weapon for global demographic manipulation. Wow, that's a good one. Meanwhile, battle over U.S. aid defines Marco Rubio's political legacy. Here we go. Patriotic Americans were at a crossroads. When Trump vowed to put America first, many rallied behind him, buoyed by the promise of cutting waste and tightening the reins on inefficient bureaucracies. But in the trenches of Washington, a fierce battle within the State Department threatens the heart of this agenda. Let's call it what it is, an ideological clash between the establishment insiders who prefer the status quo and the bold mega loyalists committed to sweeping change. At the center of this showdown is USAID, the U.S. Agency for International Development. For years, USAID had been a symbol of sprawling government, with its tentacles extending into countless foreign aid projects, some of which yield questionable returns for American taxpayer. And Reagan Reese reports for the Daily Caller, the Trump admin has targeted USAID for an overhaul to bring it under scrutiny of the Department of Government Efficiency, led by the no-nonsense Elon Musk. The objective? To slash wasteful spending and redirect our focus to making America the priority. Yet a division with the State Department led by Secretary of State Marco Rubio reveals a push and pull dynamic. Unbelievable. Meanwhile, liberal SCOTUS justices deny deportation appeal for illegals. Funny how the modern left can leap into action at lightning speed, just not for their own citizens. Forget about the fentanyl-ridden streets of Philly or the homeless veterans forgotten by bureaucracy. If an illegal immigrant claims cartel trouble, liberals will cancel lunch, race into legal battle mode, like it's the State of the Union address. And yet, something jaw-dropping just happened. One of their champions, Supreme Court Justice Elena Kagan, delivered a cold, silent blow to their open border crusade. Kagan, yes, a liberal matriarch of the bench, denied a last-minute appeal from a group of Mexican nationals who'd crossed illegally and hoped a tale of cartel threats would keep them stateside. No hearing, no full court referral, no comments, just quietly turning the page and perhaps the tide. Meanwhile, the Supreme Court forced one confrontation with Trump that led to this wild scene. Democrats keep waging lawfare against President Trump. America is now in the middle of a constitutional crisis. The Supreme Court forced one confrontation that led to this wild scene. The left-wing media decided to make the case of Kilmar Abrego Garcia their hill to die on in the immigration fight with President Trump. Press outlets describe Garcia as a Maryland father of three. Garcia is an illegal alien who stuck into America back in 2011. Two different immigration proceedings found Garcia to be a member of MS-13. In 2019, an immigration judge issued a withholding of removal where Garcia could be deported to any country on earth but his native El Salvador after Garcia claimed a rival gang would torture him were he to return.
Comes the sun, doo-doo-doo. Here comes the sun, I say it's all right.
7 stories left briefly. U.S. District Judge Mary McElroy recently slapped an injunction on the Trump admin, stopping them from freezing funds meant for EPA and Energy Department grants, money often funneled to environmental groups pushing radical climate change theories. Here's the kicker. She has a history of Democrat activism. We're not talking about someone who voted Democrat once or twice. According to Breitbart, her resume includes handing out flyers for a Democrat Senate campaign back in high school, being a page for Rhode Island Democrats at the 1984 convention, volunteering for a Democrat AG campaign, being an actual card-carrying member of the Rhode Island Democrats for years. Bad. Meanwhile, Senator Chris Van Hollen, clear Logan Act violation. This is a guy who went to Ukraine and he signed an artillery shell for Vladimir Putin. That's not what he's supposed to be doing over there. Meanwhile, Newsom loses it in a profane attack on Dodge. He ain't happy. You know, it's almost funny watching swamp creatures squirm when someone finally starts cleaning house. Trump's Department of Government Efficiency, and yes, we love the name, has been hard at work sniffing out the kind of waste and fraud that's been costing taxpayers trillions over the decades. The Democrats and the media are having a collective meltdown. It's as if Dodge turning over these rocks is exposing exactly how they've made to fleece the American public for so long. No question about it. Meanwhile, Gavin Newsom, the man who sticks his hair back and tries desperately to pretend he's a moderate with eyes on 2028 just went nuclear, faced with sensible cuts to the Glitton volunteer program AmeriCorps, Newsom didn't just disagree. He launched into a profane tirade that make a sailor blush. You'd think you can't beat that. But get this. Radical Democrat David Hogg turns on party, raising funds to disrupt primaries. He wants to spend some $20 million defeating Democrats that he thinks aren't sufficiently woke. Would you believe that? David Hogg, who was a fraud down at Parkland, where I've exposed it was another fake shooting just like Sandy Hook. I mean, I can tell you, I got a whole book about it. Here he is turning the Democrats against the Democrats. Absolutely incredible. And the Republicans, the conservatives, are just smiling. Meanwhile, planting the seed for 9/11 in the American mind. This is going to become bigger and bigger issue. Novels and the surreal world of Hollywood movies and television can sow seeds of a future reality most would find impossible to imagine in real life. The seeds, however, can remain dormant for years in carefully prepared fertile soil where given the right opportunities, they can suddenly grow into terrifying realities that leave us numb and speechless, unable to act. It was just a horror movie, right? Fiction?